Hello and welcome back to the Scotti-BYTE channel once again, and this is Scott. Today we're going to talk about IoT VLANs on Ubiquiti Unifi routers. So IoT devices like smart speakers, smart TVs, Roku's, Fire TV sticks, Apple TVs, security cameras, and other similar devices should be on a dedicated VLAN that cannot initiate communication with your main network. If a device does not have a configurable operating system and does not receive regular security updates, that probably means that it should be on a dedicated IoT network. So we're going to discuss how to create and configure this IoT network, but first we need to explain the rationale. So Ubiquiti Unifi is a little bit different from other networks because in most managed network configurations, when you create a VLAN, it has no access to other VLANs without explicit routing rules. Ubiquiti Unifi is different because creating what is called the Unifi corporate network creates implicit routing to all other VLANs. A Unifi corporate network provides a DHCP server and a custom address range. A Ubiquiti Unifi VLAN must explicitly deny communication to other VLANs through routing rules. So, what do we want to achieve? An IoT network should allow us to communicate to it from the main VLAN and be able to send back messages. The IoT VLAN should never be allowed to initiate communication on its own with anything on the main LAN. Some folks think that IoT should not be allowed to communicate with the public internet, but too many devices require public cloud connections to work. So some examples might be your smart speakers. They obviously need to talk to the public cloud so they can receive responses. But arguably, if you have a camera that might be a PoE camera and you do all of its recording inside the house, then perhaps that camera should not have access to the public internet. So there is a use case for both situations. So look at the IoT VLAN as being an enclave where we banish potentially misbehaved or untrusted devices. Consider adding a pie hole to your IoT VLAN to disallow traffic to untrusted outside domains. So a lot of people think about a router or firewall in protecting your inbound access to your network. Well, also, if you're dealing with a network that is an untrusted network like an IoT network, we might want to control what it can do outbound. And Pi-hole is a really good solution because it can disallow outbound access to domains that have been known to be untrusted. And there are other means to do that as well. And then finally, limit any open ports for hosts on your IoT VLAN with the idea that other IoT hosts are hostile. So what are some general do's and don'ts? So consider a main LAN with other than the standard 192.168.1 private address range. Don't just accept the default 192.168.1 address range right out of the box. There's so much IoT that just defaults to the standard address range. You're going to increase your security. You're going to increase your understanding of what's being configured on your network if you choose another private address range. So do create multiple VLANs for both security and traffic isolation reasons. And do not put everything on one main LAN. So this IoT VLAN we're talking about might be the first of many VLANs you would create on your network. So draw a network diagram to kind of describe what your end goal is going to be. What VLANs might I want? What might I want each of them to be able to do? And don't just accept the defaults for new IoT devices. So we want to create an IoT network on Unifi. So you go into networks, you go to IoT, or actually go to settings, you go to networks, you can go and type in a name for your network. In this case, I'm typing in IoT network. I'm setting it up as a corporate network. The reason for that is I want the DHCP server and I want the DNS entries and all that. It's going to use a LAN interface. It's going to be VLAN 111. I just arbitrarily chose that. And then the address, the subnet and the address for this, the gateway address, is going to be 192.168.111.1 with a 24-bit address mask. So one of the reasons, or one thing that I do consider to be kind of a best practice, is if you create VLAN 111, make that third octet 111 also. It just is a good way to have your network self-document itself. And then the address range I'm setting up is from 50 to 254. The reason for that is because I can imagine that I might have some IoT devices that I might statically address. In general, I like to use DHCP to address everything. And then if I want it to have the same address, I use a DHCP address reservation. And then I'm setting my DHCP server to manual because I'm presuming that I'm going to build myself a DHCP name server at 192.168.111.5, and that name server would be a pi hole. So the pi hole will intercept the traffic before it goes to the public internet to do any DNS translations. And then that's really good, as I mentioned earlier. So then the next thing is, if we have that network created, a lot of our IoT is going to be wireless, so we want to create a wireless network. And so I'm actually reusing a network I've got here. My wireless network has a different name, but let's suppose that you call this thing IoT-wireless or whatever you like, and then you're going to enable the network. In my case, I set WPA personal, so I have an address or a security key in here. And that's what all my IoT devices will use as the wireless password. And then there's a drop down here for your various VLANs and networks that you defined on your Ubiquiti Unifi router. And so I'm choosing the IoT network, and that will allow this access point to be able to assign addresses on that network. So then I want to create a firewall allow rule. So we want to allow communication back from the IoT VLAN if we initiate from another LAN. And this rule is called a LAN in rule. So this rule should occur as your first LAN in rule. And so as an example, after I create it, it shows up in routing and firewall, IPv4 rules, LAN in, and I call this thing allow established and related sessions. That's what allows me to sit on my main LAN and communicate to my IoT VLAN and receive a response. I don't want to block all traffic. I just want to block IoT traffic that initiates on the IoT LAN and tries to communicate with any other LAN. So when we create the rule itself, we go to routing and firewall, and we're going to go say create a new rule, and I call it allow established and related sessions. I enable the rule. I say I want it before the predefined rules, and I am going to say all protocols, and then I want to just check off established and related sessions. Established and related sessions are things that I initiate from another VLAN to the IoT VLAN, and this is so that they can respond. And then I say an address or port group, and I have here all local addresses. You'll see how I build the address and port group here in a moment. And then the destination, again, is all local addresses. So the next thing you should know is that Unifi allows you to create groups, and creating groups is a really good practice in order to be explicit about your routing rules and also to help your routing rules self-document. So groups make firewalls easier to read and manage. So here's a list of all the groups I have, and you see I have quite a few. You can create address groups for IPv4 addresses, address groups for IPv6 addresses. You can create port groups, and so my all local address group here is the one that you just saw that we created, and you can go down and create as many groups as you want, and then the groups are used in the routing rules. So we create the all local addresses group, and the way I do that is I went and said create a group, and then here you can see I already had an all local addresses group. You can see how many VLANs I have on my network, and they're all for several specialized purposes. And then the last one I put in was 192.168.111.0/24, which is the entire 111 address range that our new IoT network that I was creating will use. So then we want to deny IoT network access to other VLANs. So in order to do that, we're going to create a new firewall rule, and I'm going to call, and you do that by going into routing and firewall. Go into Firewall, go into Rules IPv4, and say Block IoT LAN to Main LAN. I enable that, and I say I want that before the predefined rules, just like I did with the other. And this time, instead of accept, I'm saying drop, and then it's going to be all IPv4 protocols, and then I want to drop all new communication paths. And then I said the source type is going to be a network. It's going to be the IoT network. And then the destination is going to be a network. And then my main network is called Scott and Kat's LAN. So this will disallow traffic from the IoT network back to Scott and Kat's LAN if it's new traffic, if it's some system on the IoT network initiating traffic. So what about firewall's rule ordering? Well, order's really important. The most restrictive rules should occur first. And then allow rules should occur before deny rules. So for example, in this case, the allow established related sessions rule that we created is occurring first in my list, but the block IoT LAN to main LAN is down at the bottom. You can see I have another IoT network that I had here, but I wanted to create one for this example. So I have several allow rules for different specialties up here, and then I have some block rules that are further down the list. Okay, so in summary, we created an IoT VLAN and a wireless SSID on that VLAN. An IoT VLAN with routing rules can restrict IoT devices from accessing systems on your main LAN or other VLANs if required. And UniFi routing groups can help make routing rules more explicit. By default, a UniFi corporate network allows traffic from all VLANs, and we showed that you can create router rules to restrict that. Anyway, that's it for today. I hope you found this useful. Please subscribe and like to the channel, and we'll see you next time.